I smoothed the tablecloth for the 100th time, fussing over the place settings. Everything had to be perfect for Jake and Grace's anniversary dinner. My son and daughter-in-law deserved nothing less. "Mom, relax," Jake said, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "It looks great." I turned to him, drinking in his kind eyes, so like his father's. "I just want it to be special for you two." Grace appeared in the doorway, her smile radiant. "Carolyn, you've outdone yourself. It's beautiful." "Well, let's not stand around admiring the table," I said, shooing them toward the kitchen. "We've got a feast to prepare." As we chopped vegetables and seasoned the roast, laughter filled the air. It felt good being together like this. Normal. I pushed away the nagging worry that had been gnawing at me lately. Edward had been distant, working late more often than not. But tonight wasn't about that. Tonight was for celebrating love. The front door opened with a bang. "Carolyn?" Edward's voice rang out, sharp and urgent. I wiped my hands on a dish towel. "In the kitchen, dear. You're home early." He appeared in the doorway, his face flushed. My stomach clenched at the wild look in his eyes. "I need to talk to you," he said, "privately." Jake's brow furrowed. "Dad, what's going on?" Edward ignored him, his gaze fixed on me. "Now, Carolyn." I nodded, following him to the living room. My heart pounded as I perched on the edge of the sofa. "Edward, what is it? You're scaring me." He paced, running a hand through his silver hair. "I can't do this anymore. I've tried, but I can't keep living a lie." "What are you talking about?" He stopped, fixing me with a pained look. "I've fallen in love with someone else." The world tilted sideways. I gripped the armrest, struggling to breathe. "What?" "Her name is Vanessa. She's younger. We met at work, and it just happened." A hysterical laugh bubbled up. "It just happened? 40 years of marriage, and it just happened?" Edward knelt before me, reaching for my hands. I jerked away. "I never meant to hurt you, Carolyn, but I can't deny my feelings anymore." "Your feelings?" My voice rose. "What about my feelings? What about our family?" Jake burst into the room, Grace close behind. "What the hell is going on?" I stood on shaky legs. "Your father is leaving me for a younger woman." Jake's face contorted with fury. "Are you kidding me? After everything Mom's done for you?" Edward straightened, his jaw clenching. "This doesn't concern you, Jake." "The hell it doesn't!" Jake shouted. "You're tearing our family apart." I stepped between them, holding up my hands. "Stop it, both of you. This isn't helping." Grace wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "Carolyn, I'm so sorry." I sagged against her, suddenly exhausted. "Edward, I think you should leave." He nodded, shoulders slumping. "I'll get my things tomorrow." As the door closed behind him, the reality of what had just happened hit me like a tidal wave. I sank to the floor, sobs racking my body. Jake knelt beside me, pulling me into a fierce hug. "It's okay, Mom. We're here. We've got you." I clung to him, my mind reeling. How had this happened? Where had I gone wrong? And who was this Vanessa who had stolen my husband's heart? As the tears subsided, a steely resolve took root. This wasn't over. I wouldn't let Edward throw away our life together without a fight. And if he truly wanted out, well, he'd better be prepared for one hell of a battle. I pulled back, wiping my eyes. "I'm sorry about dinner," I said, my voice hoarse. Grace squeezed my hand. "Don't worry about that. What can we do?" I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. "You can help me figure out who this Vanessa is, because I have a feeling there's more to this story than Edward's letting on." Jake's eyes widened. "Mom, are you sure that's a good idea?" I met his gaze, steel in my voice. "I'm sure of one thing. I deserve answers, and I'm going to get them, one way or another." The morning after Edward's bombshell, I woke to the sound of raised voices. I stumbled out of bed, my head pounding from a night of fitful sleep and too many tears. Jake's angry tone cut through the fog of my grief. "How could you do this to Mom, after everything she's done for you?" I crept down the stairs, my heart racing. Edward's reply was low and terse. "This is between your mother and me. Stay out of it." "Like hell I will," Jake shouted. "You're tearing this family apart." I rounded the corner to find them squaring off in the living room, Jake's face flushed with anger, Edward set in stubborn lines. "Stop it, both of you," I said, my voice hoarse. They turned, startled by my presence. Jake's expression softened. "Mom, I'm sorry. We didn't mean to wake you." Edward's gaze skittered away from mine. "I just came to get some of my things." I nodded, too numb to argue. "Fine, take what you need and go." As Edward headed upstairs, Jake turned to me, his eyes blazing. "You can't let him get away with this, Mom. We should call a lawyer, make sure he doesn't try to cheat you out of what's rightfully yours." I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. "Jake, honey, I appreciate your concern, but I need to handle this myself." "But Mom," "No buts," I said firmly. This is my marriage, my life. I won't have you jeopardizing your relationship with your father over this. Jake's jaw clenched. He doesn't deserve my respect after what he's done. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. He's still your father. And despite everything, we had 40 good years together. That has to count for something. Edward's footsteps on the stairs silenced us. He appeared with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I'll be staying at the Comfort Inn for now, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. And I'll call you about arranging to get the rest of my things. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As he reached for the door, Jake stepped forward. Dad, he said, his voice tight. I hope she's worth it. Edward's shoulders stiffened. Son, you don't understand. You're right. I don't. Jake cut him off. And I don't want to. Just know that if you hurt Mom any more than you already have, you'll have me to answer to. The door slammed behind Edward, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. I slumped forward, burying my face in my hands. Oh, Jake, I whispered. What am I going to do? He sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. We'll figure it out, Mom. You're not alone in this. I leaned into him, grateful for his strength, but a nagging worry gnawed at me. I don't want this to come between you and your father, or affect your relationship with Grace. Jake's arm tightened around me. Don't worry about us. We're on your side, 100%. I pulled away, meeting his eyes. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. I won't let Edward's mistakes poison our family any more than they already have. A key turned in the lock, and Grace bustled in, arms laden with grocery bags. I thought we could use some comfort food, she announced, then faltered at the tension in the room. What did I miss? Jake filled her in as I retreated to the kitchen, busying myself with putting away the groceries. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the past 24 hours. How had my life imploded so quickly? As I reached for a box of pasta, my hand brushed against the anniversary gift I'd hidden for Jake and Grace. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. In all the chaos, I'd forgotten their celebration entirely. I sank to the floor, clutching the small package to my chest as sobs racked my body. This was supposed to be a joyous time for them, and instead, my marital drama was overshadowing everything. In that moment, I made a decision. I would not let Edward's betrayal define me or destroy our family. I would face this head-on my own terms. It was time to reclaim my life and my dignity. Wiping my eyes, I stood and squared my shoulders. The first step? Finding out exactly who this Vanessa was and what she wanted with my husband. I stood in the middle of my new apartment, surrounded by boxes and the remnants of my old life. The space was small, but it was mine. A fresh start. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Martha, my best friend of 30 years, holding a bottle of wine and wearing a determined expression. All right, honey, she said, breezing past me. Time for some girl talk and liquid therapy. I couldn't help but smile. It's barely noon, Martha. She waved a dismissive hand. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Now, where are your glasses? As we settled on my second-hand couch, Martha fixed me with a stern look. Spill it, Carolyn. I want every detail about this hussy who's stolen your man. I sighed, twirling the wine in my glass. There's not much to tell. Her name's Vanessa. She works with Edward. That's all I know. Martha's eyes narrowed. That can't be all. Have you done any digging? No, I admitted. I've been too busy trying to put my life back together. Well, lucky for you, I've got connections, Martha said with a mischievous glint in her eye. My nephew works in HR at Edward's company. He did some snooping for me. My heart raced. Martha, you didn't. Oh, I did, she said, leaning forward. And honey, you're not going to like what I found out. I braced myself. Tell me. Vanessa's been working there for over a year, in Edward's department. Martha's voice softened. Carolyn, I think this has been going on for a while. The room spun. I set down my glass, afraid I might drop it. A year? But how could I not have known? Martha took my hand. Don't blame yourself. Men can be very good at hiding these things when they want to. Anger flared, hot and sudden. I want to confront him, make him tell me the truth. Not yet, Martha cautioned. We need more information. A plan. The doorbell rang again. I frowned, not expecting anyone else. When I opened it, I found Jake on the other side, looking uncomfortable. Hey, Mom, he said, shifting from foot to foot. Can we talk? I ushered him in, introducing him to Martha. He nodded politely, then turned to me with a serious expression. Mom, I know you said to stay out of it, but I couldn't just sit back and do nothing, he said in a rush. I hired a private investigator. You did what? I gasped. Jake pulled out a manila envelope. He's been following Dad and Vanessa. There are photos. I snatched the envelope, my hands shaking as I opened it. The first photo showed Edward and a young woman, Vanessa, I presumed, having dinner at an intimate restaurant. They were leaning close, smiling, his hand covering hers on the table. There's more, Jake said quietly. I flipped through the stack. Edward and Vanessa entering a hotel. Kissing in a park. Shopping for jewelry. The last photo made my blood run cold. It showed them outside a real estate office, Edward's arm around Vanessa's waist as they looked at a for sale sign. He's buying her a house, I whispered, my voice breaking, with our money. Martha cursed under her breath. Jake put a hand on my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Mom. I thought you should know. I sank onto the couch, the photos scattered around me like shrapnel from an explosion. My mind raced, piecing together a year's worth of late nights at the office, business trips, and vague excuses. What are you going to do? Jake asked. I looked up at him, then at Martha. In that moment, something inside me hardened. The shock and grief of the past weeks crystallized into a cold, sharp anger. I'm going to fight, I said, my voice steady, for my dignity, for my family, and for every penny that lying bastard owes me. Martha nodded approvingly. That's my girl. Jake's eyes widened. Mom, are you sure this could get ugly? I stood, gathering the photos. It's already ugly, Jake. But I won't let Edward and his little girlfriend destroy everything we've built. It's time I showed them both what I'm made of. As I stared at the evidence of my husband's betrayal, a plan began to form. Edward thought he could discard me like yesterday's news. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. I stood outside Edward's office building, my heart pounding. After weeks of digging and planning, I was finally ready to confront Vanessa face to face. I'd learned she worked on the same floor as Edward, in marketing. The thought of them sneaking around behind my back for months made my blood boil. Taking a deep breath, I pushed through the revolving doors and marched to the elevator. As I rode up to the 14th floor, I rehearsed what I'd say. I'd be calm, dignified. I wouldn't let her see how much she'd hurt me. The elevator dinged, and I stepped out into a bustling office. A young receptionist looked up, her smile faltering as she took in my determined expression. Can I help you? She asked. I'm here to see Vanessa, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. It's urgent. Before the receptionist could respond, a melodic laugh floated across the office. I turned to see a stunning woman in her early 30s, her golden hair cascading over her shoulders as she chatted with a group of coworkers. Vanessa. Seeing her in person, so vibrant and full of life, hit me like a punch to the gut. How could I compete with that? I must have made a sound, because Vanessa looked up, her eyes meeting mine. Recognition flickered across her face, followed quickly by surprise, and then guilt. Mrs. Harrison, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The use of my married name snapped me back to reality. I straightened my spine and strode towards her. Vanessa, I said coolly, I think it's time we had a chat, don't you? She nodded, leading me to a small conference room. As soon as the door closed behind us, words tumbled out of my mouth. How could you? I demanded. He's old enough to be your father. We have a life, a family. Did that mean nothing to you? Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, she said. I never meant for any of this to happen. Edward was just so kind, so attentive. He made me feel special. I laughed bitterly. And I suppose the fact that he's a wealthy, successful man had nothing to do with it? She flinched. It wasn't like that. We connected on a deeper level. He understands me in a way no one else ever has. Oh, spare me, I snapped. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've torn apart a family. My son, my daughter-in-law, they're devastated. Vanessa's face crumpled. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Edward said. He said you'd grown apart, that you'd understand. I felt like I'd been slapped. Understand? How could I possibly understand my husband throwing away 40 years of marriage for a fling with a woman half his age? It's not a fling, Vanessa insisted. We love each other. We're planning a future together. The room spun. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. A future? What kind of future do you think you'll have? Do you really believe he'll leave everything behind for you? Doubt flickered in Vanessa's eyes. He said he would. We've been looking at houses. With my money, I cut in. Did he tell you that? The money we saved together for our retirement, for our grandchildren's education. Vanessa paled. I didn't know. There's a lot you don't know, I said, my voice low and dangerous. But I'm going to make sure Edward knows everything about how you've been manipulating him, using him for his money and status. That's not true, Vanessa cried. I leaned in close. Isn't it? Think carefully, Vanessa. Are you prepared for the scandal this will cause? For everyone to know you as the homewrecker who destroyed a respected family man's life? Tears streamed down her face. Please, she whispered, I never wanted it to be like this. I straightened up, smoothing my blouse. It's too late for that. You made your choice. Now you'll have to live with the consequences. As I turned to leave, Vanessa called out, What are you going to do? I paused at the door, looking back at her tear-stained face. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I'm going to fight, I said. For my marriage, for my family, and for every penny Edward and I built together. And heaven help anyone who stands in my way. With that, I walked out, leaving Vanessa sobbing behind me. As I rode the elevator down, a plan began to form. It was time to show Edward and Vanessa exactly who they were dealing with. I was elbow deep in soapy water, scrubbing dishes with more force than necessary, when my phone rang. Jake's name flashed on the screen. Mom, are you sitting down? His voice was a mix of excitement and nervousness. I'm standing at the sink. Why? I replied, drying my hands. Grace is pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother. The world tilted on its axis. I gripped the counter, overwhelmed by a tidal wave of emotions. Joy, pride, and love crashed over me, momentarily washing away the pain and anger of the past few weeks. Oh, Jake, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. That's wonderful news. I'm so happy for you both. We talked for a few more minutes, making plans for a celebratory dinner. As I hung up, a bittersweet ache settled in my chest. This should have been a moment of pure happiness, shared with Edward. Instead, I was alone in my tiny apartment, the ghost of my broken marriage haunting every corner. I shook off the melancholy. This was about Jake and Grace, not my problems. I would not let Edward's betrayal taint this precious moment. The next evening, I arrived at Jake and Grace's house with an armful of gifts and a plastered-on smile. As Grace opened the door, her radiant glow took my breath away. Carolyn, she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug. Thank you for coming. I held her tight, blinking back tears. I wouldn't miss this for the world, sweetheart. Jake appeared behind her, his face a mixture of joy and concern. Mom, you didn't have to bring all this. I waved him off. Nonsense. It's not every day I find out I'm going to be a grandmother. As we settled in the living room, surrounded by baby books and ultrasound photos, I felt a warmth I hadn't experienced in weeks. This was what mattered. Family, love, new beginnings. Grace regaled me with tales of morning sickness and cravings, while Jake hovered protectively. I offered advice and shared stories from my own pregnancy, carefully editing out any mention of Edward. But as the evening wore on, I couldn't help but notice the elephant in the room. Edward's absence was a palpable void, made all the more apparent by Jake and Grace's occasional worried glances in my direction. Finally, during a lull in the conversation, Jake cleared his throat. Mom, we've been thinking, maybe we should invite Dad to the next ultrasound appointment. He is the baby's grandfather, after all. The warmth I'd been basking in evaporated instantly. Oh, I said, my voice small. I see. Grace reached for my hand. We don't have to if you're not comfortable with it. We just thought, well, it might be a chance for everyone to come together. I forced a smile. Of course. You're absolutely right. This baby deserves to know all of its grandparents. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. As I drove home, my earlier joy curdled into something bitter and angry. How dare Edward get to waltz back into our lives and play the doting grandfather? How dare he reap the rewards of family while abandoning his responsibilities? By the time I reached my apartment, I was seething. I paced the small living room, my mind racing. I couldn't let Edward think he could have it both ways, the excitement of a new relationship and the comfort of his old family. My eyes fell on the stack of evidence I'd gathered about his affair. Photos, financial records, emails, all proof of his betrayal. I'd been hesitant to use it, clinging to some misguided hope of reconciliation. But now, I reached for my phone, my hand shaking slightly as I dialed a number I'd memorized but never used. Hello, a gruff voice answered. Mr. Daniels, this is Carolyn Harrison. You were recommended to me as a divorce attorney. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I think it's time we talked about my options. As I hung up, a strange calm settled over me. The path ahead would be difficult, but I was done playing the victim. It was time to take control of my life, to fight for what was rightfully mine. And if Edward thought he could have his cake and eat it too, he was in for a rude awakening. Let the battle begin. My hands shook as I clutched the manila envelope. Inside was irrefutable proof of Edward's betrayal, meticulously gathered by my neighbor Frank, a retired detective who'd taken on my case as a personal mission. I stood outside the coffee shop where Edward had agreed to meet me, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. Through the window, I saw him sitting at a corner table, looking relaxed and carefree. The sight made my blood boil. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door and marched toward him. His eyes widened as he took in my expression. "Carolyn," he said, half rising. "What's wrong?" I slapped the envelope on the table. "Sit down, Edward. We need to talk." As he sank back into his chair, I pulled out the chair opposite him and sat, my back ramrod straight. "Open it," I commanded. With a puzzled frown, Edward reached for the envelope. As he pulled out the contents, photos, bank statements, hotel receipts, the color drained from his face. "How did you?" he began. "It doesn't matter how I got it," I cut him off. "What matters is that I know everything. Every lie, every secret meeting, every penny you've spent on her." Edward's jaw clenched. "You had me followed?" "Don't you dare try to make me the bad guy here," I hissed. "You're the one who threw away 40 years of marriage for a woman half your age." He had the grace to look ashamed, but only for a moment. Then his eyes hardened. "You don't understand, Carolyn. Vanessa and I, we have a connection. She makes me feel alive again." "And I made you feel dead?" I spat. "Was our life together really so terrible?" Edward sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It wasn't terrible. It was just stagnant. We fell into a routine. Vanessa reminded me of what it feels like to be passionate about life." Each word was a dagger to my heart, but I refused to let him see how much he was hurting me. "So you decided to throw everything away? Our home, our family, our future?" "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," he said. "I was going to tell you. I couldn't find the right time." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, I'm sure. And I suppose you were going to tell me about the house you're buying her? With our retirement savings?" Edward's eyes widened. "How did you?" "I told you. I know everything," I said, leaning forward. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me a fair divorce settlement, half of everything we've built together. And you're going to do it quietly, without dragging our family through a public scandal." He bristled. "Or what?" I pulled out one last photo, Edward and Vanessa in a compromising position in his office. "Or I'll make sure your boss, your colleagues, and every country club member in town sees this. How do you think that will affect your precious career?" Edward's face flushed with anger. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," I said, my voice ice cold. "You seem to have forgotten who I am, Edward. I'm not just the quiet librarian you can push aside. I'm the woman who stood by you for 40 years, who helped build your success. And I'll be damned if I let you take that away from me." For a long moment, we stared at each other across the table, decades of shared history crackling between us like live wires. Finally, Edward slumped in his chair. "What do you want?" he asked, defeated. I stood, gathering the evidence. "I want what's fair. My lawyer will be in touch." As I turned to leave, Edward called out, "Carolyn, wait. I'm sorry for everything." I paused, my hand on the door. Without turning back, I said, "Save your apologies, Edward. It's too late for that." Stepping out into the sunlight, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The confrontation I'd been dreading was over, but the real battle was just beginning. As I walked away from the cafe, I realized that for the first time in weeks, I felt strong, empowered. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it head on. I smoothed my dress, hands trembling slightly as I rang the doorbell to Jake and Grace's house. The weight of the evidence in my purse felt like a ticking time bomb. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of their anniversary, but I knew it would end in chaos. Grace opened the door, her smile faltering as she took in my expression. "Carolyn, is everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Of course, dear. Happy anniversary." As I stepped inside, the sound of laughter drifted from the dining room. My heart clenched when I recognized Edward's voice among them. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself and followed Grace. The room fell silent as I entered. Edward's face paled, while Jake and our other relatives looked between us, sensing the tension. "Mom," Jake said, rising, "I'm glad you could make it." I nodded, my eyes locked on Edward. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Throughout dinner, conversation was strained. I could feel Edward's nervous glances, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Jake and Grace tried valiantly to keep things light, but the undercurrent of tension was unmistakable. As Grace brought out dessert, I knew it was time. I couldn't let this charade continue any longer. "Before we eat," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter, "there's something I need to say." All eyes turned to me. Edward half rose from his chair, panic written across his face. "Carolyn, please." "No, Edward." I said firmly. They deserve to know the truth. I pulled out the envelope, spreading its contents across the table. Photos of Edward and Vanessa, bank statements, hotel receipts, all laid bare for our family to see. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Jake's face contorted with fury, while Grace covered her mouth in shock. "Dad," Jake growled, "what the hell is this?" Edward's shoulders slumped. I can explain." "Explain what?" I cut in. "How you've been cheating on me for months? How you've been spending our retirement savings on your mistress?" The room erupted into chaos. Jake lunged across the table, grabbing Edward by the collar. "How could you do this to Mom, to our family?" Grace tried to intervene, tears streaming down her face. "Please, stop. Think of the baby." Her words cut through the mayhem like a knife. Jake released Edward, stepping back with a look of disgust. Edward, his face ashen, turned to me. "Carolyn, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." "Save it," I spat. "I've heard all your excuses. I'm done." I turned to the rest of the family, my voice shaking. "I wanted you all to know the truth. Edward and I are getting a divorce. He's chosen his new life, and I'm choosing to move on with mine." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, to my surprise, my sister-in-law stood up. "Carolyn," she said softly, "we're here for you. Whatever you need." One by one, the others nodded, murmuring words of support. Even in my pain, I felt a warmth spreading through my chest. I wasn't alone. Edward, looking utterly defeated, slumped in his chair. "What do you want from me, Carolyn?" I met his gaze, years of hurt and betrayal fueling my words. "I want a fair separation, half of everything we've built together, and I want you to look our son in the eye and explain why you threw away 40 years of marriage for a fling." Jake's jaw clenched, but he nodded, waiting for his father's response. Edward looked around the room at the faces of the family he'd betrayed. Finally, he nodded. "Okay," he whispered. "You're right. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." As the reality of what had just happened sank in, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion wash over me. The truth was out, the battle lines drawn. But as I looked at the supportive faces of my family, I realized this wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. 6 months after that fateful dinner, I stood in the nursery of Jake and Grace's home, cradling my newborn granddaughter. As I gazed into her tiny face, I marveled at how much had changed in such a short time. The divorce had been finalized last month, surprisingly amicable given the circumstances. Edward, true to his word, had agreed to a fair settlement. But the real shock came when Vanessa left him just weeks after our separation became public. "She said she didn't sign up for all this drama," Jake had told me, a mix of disgust and pity in his voice. "Guess she was more interested in the lifestyle than the man." I'd felt a fleeting moment of satisfaction at the news, quickly replaced by an unexpected wave of compassion. Edward had lost everything, his family, his reputation, and the woman he'd thrown it all away for. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to see Edward standing there, looking older and more haggard than I'd ever seen him. "May I come in?" he asked hesitantly. I nodded, watching as he approached, his eyes fixed on the baby in my arms. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "Yes, she is," I agreed. "Would you like to hold her?" Surprise flashed across his face, followed by gratitude. As I carefully placed our granddaughter in his arms, I saw tears well up in his eyes. "Carolyn," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "I'm so sorry. For everything. I was a fool, and I've lost the best things in my life because of it." I sighed, feeling the last of my anger and resentment melt away. "I know, Edward, and while I can't forget what happened, I think I'm finally ready to forgive." He looked up, hope shining in his eyes. "Really?" I nodded. "Not for you, but for me, and for her," I added, gently stroking the baby's cheek. "She deserves to know her grandfather, despite his mistakes." Edward's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you," he whispered. "I promise I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends." As we stood there, cooing over our granddaughter, Jake appeared in the doorway. His eyes widened at the sight of us together, but after a moment, he smiled. "Everything okay in here?" he asked. I reached out, pulling him into our circle. "Everything's perfect," I assured him. Later that evening, as I prepared to leave, Grace pulled me aside. "Carolyn," she said, her eyes shining, "I just wanted to tell you how amazing you've been through all of this. You're the strongest woman I know." Her words warmed my heart. "Thank you, sweetheart. But I couldn't have done it without your support, all of you." As I drove home to my cozy apartment, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The pain, the anger, the betrayal. It had all led me to this moment. I discovered a strength I never knew I possessed, forged new bonds with my family, and even found a way to forgive the man who'd broken my heart. I thought about the new book club I'd joined, the painting classes I'd started taking. The world that had seemed so small and suffocating in the wake of Edward's betrayal had expanded, full of possibilities I'd never dared to imagine before. Pulling into my parking spot, I caught sight of my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same one who'd stood shell-shocked in her kitchen all those months ago. This woman was stronger, wiser, and infinitely more resilient. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The future stretched out before me, uncertain but full of promise. Whatever came next, I knew I could handle it. After all, I was Carolyn Harrison, survivor, grandmother, and architect of my own happiness, and my story was far from over.